My boyfriend and I went to his sister's wedding last Friday. They've always had a strained relationship, but overall it was a great wedding. We were enjoying the party when my boyfriend goes up to the DJ and asks for the microphone. I thought he was going to do a toast for his sister, but no. He asked me to come up to him and I was terrified. I remember thinking to myself, he is not going to do that. No way. I take a quick glance at the bride and she is furious. He then proceeds to propose to me at his sister's wedding. Everyone was cheering for us, but his sister just looked like she wanted to cry. I didn't know what else to do other than say yes. I was crying, but not happy crying. After that, I went up to his sister and was apologizing over and over. She was livid. I felt so sorry for her. I left early and my boyfriend came back to the hotel room at 2 a.m. hammered. And so I decided to confront him. At first he was like, "Babe, my whole family was there and it was the best time." Until he finally admitted that he did it because his sister had ruined his graduation by announcing her wedding. He used my proposal to get back at his sister. I left the morning after and haven't talked to him since. I don't know what to do. He won't stop calling, but I'm overwhelmed with emotions. When I graduated high school, I met a guy who was a refugee from the Middle East. We ended up dating, but I found out he was cheating on me, so I broke up with him. Later on, I found out I was pregnant. When I told him, he freaked out and wanted me to get an abortion, and when I told him no, he said he'd do everything in his power to make sure I lost the baby. Once he figured out I was keeping the baby, he tried his best to get back with me, but I denied him. That's when I found out that the girl he was cheating on me with also got pregnant. When I tried reaching out to her, she called me crazy. I just wanted to warn her to make sure she's okay. Over the years, he kept trying to come back for me and the baby, but I kept him at a distance. His other girlfriend reached out to me and told me he went to jail because he put hands on her. I tried to warn the girl that he cheated on me with that he was no good, but it wasn't until her third child that she finally saw his true darkness. She regrets meeting him and not listening to me, but then we found out he's engaged to someone back in his home country. We both tried reaching out to her, but she didn't want to hear any of it. We tried to tell her that he has 4 kids, 1 with me and 3 with someone else, but she didn't believe us. I know I've done my part for reaching out, but I still feel really bad for this girl and what her future entails. I don't know what I should do. I was extremely hurt to find out that my mom, step-siblings, and stepdad were attending the wedding. When I tried to express my feelings, they dismissed me and said it wasn't their fault that I got in the way of true love and made me out to be some sort of vindictive Disney villain. So I cut contact with them and I barely spoke to my mom in 5 years. Fast forward and I get engaged to my now husband. Due to COVID, we had a small ceremony and I also fell pregnant. My dad and stepmom have been amazing throughout all of this. She knitted a pair of booties and posted them on Facebook and tagged me about how she's excited for her grandbaby. My mom didn't know I was pregnant. Shortly after, I received a phone call to confirm. Since then, she's invited me and my husband over to her house multiple times. I've declined every single time for the obvious reason. My ex-fiance and stepsister live there. The next time my mom called, I told her I didn't want them to keep inviting me over when they knew I would be forced to see my stepsister. I'm still hurt over what they did to me, and I told her I wasn't sure if I wanted people like them in my child's life. My mom was crying hysterically and kept saying I was being cruel and I couldn't deprive her of her first grandchild. She kept wailing about how I might be the only person in our family to even give her grandchildren. Am I wrong for trying to keep my mom out of my child's life? I was extremely hurt to find out that my mom, step-siblings, and stepdad were attending the wedding. When I tried to express my feelings, they dismissed me and said it wasn't their fault that I got in the way of true love and made me out to be some sort of vindictive Disney villain. So I cut contact with them and I barely spoke to my mom in 5 years. Fast forward and I get engaged to my now husband. Due to COVID, we had a small ceremony and I also fell pregnant. My dad and stepmom have been amazing throughout all of this. She knitted a pair of booties and posted them on Facebook and tagged me about how she's excited for her grandbaby. My mom didn't know I was pregnant. Shortly after, I received a phone call to confirm. Since then, she's invited me and my husband over to her house multiple times. I've declined every single time for the obvious reason. My ex-fiance and stepsister live there. The next time my mom called, I told her I didn't want them to keep inviting me over when they knew I would be forced to see my stepsister. I'm still hurt over what they did to me, and I told her I wasn't sure if I wanted people like them in my child's life. My mom was crying hysterically and kept saying I was being cruel and I couldn't deprive her of her first grandchild. She kept wailing about how I might be the only person in our family to even give her grandchildren. Am I wrong for trying to keep my mom out of my child's life? I've always had a good relationship with my mother-in-law up until I was pregnant. My husband's side of the family hasn't had a girl born in the past 100 years. So when everyone found out I was pregnant with a girl, no one believed me. Everyone was so shocked when it was announced that most of them denied it up until the moment she was born. And that's when the horrible comments started. Whenever my husband wasn't around, my mother-in-law would make snarky comments like, "I wonder where she got that nose. It's definitely not my son's." I never told him and let everything slide because she's older and she's my mother-in-law. But when I was pregnant with baby number 2, and yes, it was another girl, I told him to wait as long as possible because I know she wouldn't like the news. When she found out it was a girl, she started sobbing and screaming. She was calling me a whore and demanded that I get out of her house. "Those girls are not ours. She's a whore, a slut. My son did not make those girls." She looked at me and said, "I let you get away with it the first time. I took you in as family. I allowed my son to believe he fathered that brat, but I will not allow it again." My husband was yelling at his mom, and I got up and took my daughter and I ran to the car sobbing. We decide to go no contact with my mother-in-law for the rest of my pregnancy. Until she decides to apologize for what she's done, we don't want to speak to her. A few weeks before my due date, my mother-in-law reaches out to my husband and says he misses her and my daughter. So he asks if we can go have dinner to try to mend the relationship. I said okay, but I didn't feel comfortable bringing my daughter, so I left her to my sister. At dinner, my husband asked his mom if she's ready to apologize. She said she's ready, but as soon as she gets the paternity test result, because my husband cannot be the father, and the fact that we have 2 girls is ridiculous. I proceed to grab my things because I'm not listening to this, when she grabs me and slaps me as hard as she can across the face. She calls me an effing whore and says I need to own up to my problems. I push her away, trying to get to the door as fast as possible when she throws a snow globe at my head. I fall to the ground, and that's when she starts kicking me. In my belly. My husband pushes her off of me and she breaks 2 fingers, but takes me to the hospital where I receive 6 stitches. She then tried to press charges against my husband, saying he assaulted her, but the hospital had more than enough proof to put her in jail. I sent her a gift in jail, the paternity results showing that her son is the father of my 2 daughters.
Storytime ex-boyfriend edition. Let's talk about the drama. So I dated this guy for about 1.5 years. I knew him for 8 years before that. He was actually my teacher at university. But don't worry, we dated way after I graduated. I'm even a little bit older than him. Artsy, cute, nerdy, what can go wrong? Well, we could only hang out after 7 p.m. and there were only specific days that we could hang out. Yes, I know, red flags, I was stupid. But the time we had together was amazing. So I decided to turn a blind eye. This guy, with no shame at all, hangs out with other girls and posts them all over his social media. He refused to call me his girlfriend, but I was the love of his life, the most beautiful girl he's ever been with. I even went to his family functions. So basically, I was a girlfriend at convenience. So I start paying attention. There's girls' hair all over his apartment. Perfectly laid out, by the way. She knew about me. So I decided that I was going to take my pink hair and lay it right next to hers. This story gets so juicy, like for part 2. Storytime ex-boyfriend edition part 2. So the girl my boyfriend was cheating on me with was strategically placing all of her black, beautiful hair all over his apartment. I then proceeded to leave my beautiful pink hair right next to hers. Within a day, I started finding bobby pins and lady garments in places that I would definitely find them. Needless to say, my relationship with him was over. He apparently was so heartbroken and called me 3 times a day for 6 months straight. I finally picked up the phone and we decided to be friends since we had a 8-year friend relationship prior to this.
So when I first started waxing, I met this girl and she came in for her very first wax. I laid the strips down and I pulled them. Well, she fainted. I immediately went into a panic. She fainted for like less than a minute, but I was already dialing 911. She woke up and she's like, no, hang up. This is what happens when I'm in pain. And I'm like, girl, you should have told me this before I started the session. She's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, girl. So I'm like, okay, you have to bring someone with you every time you come then, because I cannot be responsible for you fainting. So now she always comes with someone.
One time I was behind the register at Victoria's Secret. This customer walks in and immediately everybody spots her as a red flag. She's just picking up items, throwing them in her bag, not looking at sizes, not looking at colors. So everybody's like, everyone's on their walkie like, watch this customer. She's coming to the fitting room. She's headed to the cash drop. Somebody get her, check her ID, get her. She has a bag full of stuff. And guess who gets her at the register? Me. So she comes to my register and she dumps out her stuff and we're having a regular conversation. Hi, how are you? Yada, yada, yada. Her total comes up to probably between $700 to $900. It was expensive. My manager is at the register next to me talking to me on the walkie. Ashley, make sure you get that ID. Don't matter what she's using, make sure you get that ID. So I ask her for the ID because she's paying credit. Why do you need to ask for my ID? Just take it, run it. I'm like, no ma'am, I'm sorry, I need your ID for the purchase. She starts to raise her voice at me.